The Imperturbable Tucker by A.M. Burrage. It could only have happened in a large town parish whose ill-defined boundaries were known only to the vicar and the parish clerk, if even to them, and it happened on Christmas Eve, which means that the weather was muggy and wet, and that everybody with any desire or pretensions to sing carols, and many who had neither, were out and after their neighbours' legal tender. The official carol singers, comprising certain male voices from the church choir, led by Mr. Thomas Tucker, were of course doing better business than their rivals. The reasons for this were many and good. The noises they produced were less painful to sensitive ears. They had locus standi, and where Mr. Tucker observed no symptoms of generosity, he was able to plead that all the monies were to be handed direct to a most deserving cause. Apart from the fact that he had a baritone voice of sorts, and could reach the compass of a sailor having teeth out without gas, there seemed no very good reason why Thomas Tucker should be a member of the church choir. Many people questioned why he was, although the answer was quite simple. It was because he was a creature of habit, and had been made to join the choir as a small boy. His mother had conveyed him to all the practices by the left ear, which even now protruded a little more than the right, until the habit was so engrafted on him that he could be trusted to go alone. For similar reasons he was now a butcher. He'd been apprenticed to the trade in days when his fancy had lightly turned to the high seas and to deeds of doubtful ethics, under a flag which he was wont to call the Jolly Old Roger. He'd become a full-blown butcher simply because everybody else connected with that particular shop had died. He was not only a person with whom habit soon became unalterable nature, but one to whom nothing came amiss. He was phlegmatic as a waxwork figure, and people said it was impossible to shock, surprise, or scare him. How true this may be, the reader must presently judge for himself. Tucker and his band of singers had been out some 2 hours ere they came to a curious old house, once of some pretensions, hiding away from its new and perky neighbours behind a red wall, enclosing a bedraggled garden. 2 or 3 members of the choir halted before the rusty gate and debated as to whether the house came within the parish boundary. "Doesn't matter," said Tucker. "People who live in it won't know either." And he pushed open the creaking gate and led the procession up the path. They formed a semicircle in front of the hall door of the dingy old house that showed not a light anywhere. "I believe it's empty," said the leading tenor. "Soon see," said Tucker. "Good King Wenceslas." They got as far as the good king's lavish order for pine logs when they suddenly stopped. Tucker finished the verse alone. No lights had appeared, and all except Tucker were convinced that they were wasting their breath on an empty house. Hoarsely they pointed out this probability once more to Tucker, who had otherwise, from force of habit, gone through with the carol to the bitter end, and possibly begun another. "Soon see," said Tucker. "Wait a sec." He strode to the steps and walked up to the door. There was a great black handle which slipped back under pressure, and Tucker pushed the door open before him. "Don't be a fool," hissed a voice. "You can't walk in." "I have," said Tucker, and he closed the door behind him. At first it seemed to him that the house really was empty. There were no lights in the front rooms, as he'd already seen from without, and the place smelled of dust and decay. But nothing less than a complete inspection of the premises would satisfy him, and largesse would certainly be demanded of any human being. He was on his way to the servants' quarters when he noticed that a door on his left was thinly framed by a bluish light stealing through its chinks. Tucker pushed open the door without knocking, and entered the room beyond. The room was small and almost devoid of furniture. It was lit by a candle which burned strangely and gave the one bluish light which had attracted him. In the far corner, a villainous-looking old man was on his knees before a great chest. The old man was clad in rags, and the wicked, leering face above his dirty white beard would have inspired a medieval designer of gargoyles. But in spite of his rags, the chest was full of gold pieces which ran like sand through his long, crooked fingers, and chinked wickedly as they dropped. The scene was weird enough, and sufficiently awe-inspiring to appall the stoutest heart. "Evening," said Tucker. The old man's wicked eyes blazed at him. "Stranger," he said in deep, hollow tones, "what do you here?" "Collecting," said Tucker. "Ain't you heard the carol singers?" "No." "Ah, you ought to have been round in the front. Will you go round, or shall I bring 'em in here?" "Do you know whom you address?" cried the old man in an awful voice. "I am Devlo the miser." "Pleased to meet you," said Tucker. "Subscriptions, however small, are invited. You don't seem to have anything less than Jimmy O'Goblins in that box. So much the better." "You will get naught from me," cried the old man angrily. "I bet I do. Buck up. Then we'll sing to you. Will you have Noel or Hark the Herald?" "The only music I delight in is the tinkling of these little coins, which are my heart's blood to me." "Quite nice," Tucker agreed. "Wish I had a few of 'em. Come on, it's Christmas time. It's a good cause." "Never," cried the old man, "have I given anything away." "Time you did then," said Tucker. "This is tainted gold." "Can't help that," said Tucker. "We got 2 company promoters in our congregation, and there'd be a row if the verger didn't pass 'em the plate. Every penny of this was wrung from the poor." "And I bet it wanted some ringing," said Tucker. "You ought to see the money I've got out on my books." "Except what was stolen by violence." "Ah, that's easier," said Tucker. "I have committed bigamy, theft, arson, forgery." "Really?" said Tucker, faintly interested. "And 2 murders," thundered the old man. "You've been a bit of a nip, haven't you?" said Tucker agreeably. "But think what a comfort it'll be to you to know that you've contributed." A look of hopelessness dawned in the old man's wicked eyes. "Will nothing frighten you away from here?" he demanded. "Not that I know of." "And you will not go?" "Not until you've subscribed." The old man interrupted him with a loud groan. "Take a coin, then," he said resignedly. "Stay, I will find you the smallest. Anything to get rid—" "Hold hard," said Tucker. "You needn't be mean about it. Remember, it's for an excellent cause." "What cause?" "The Church Warming Fund," said Tucker. A terrible cry emanated from the top of the old man's beard. He dropped the lid of the chest and held it down as firmly as he could with his thin hands. "Look here," he exclaimed. "There are limits, you know. I told you the kind of life I led. Well, I died years ago, and if you think I'm going to subscribe to any kind of warming fund—" Words suddenly failed him, and so, seemingly, did everything else. The light and the apparition, for an apparition Tucker now knew it to be, vanished in a flash. "There now," Tucker murmured. He lingered to strike a match and see if the treasure chest had also vanished. Finding that it had, he murmured, "There's a pity," and went out to rejoin his fellow carol singers. "Any luck?" someone shouted as he reappeared. Tucker shook his head. "Found an old man, but I couldn't get nothing out of him." "Why didn't you tell him to go to blazes?" somebody demanded. "Wasn't necessary," said Tucker. "Come on, next house."